Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP Jumpaz, for the two-man power trip. Of course, joining me is the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavi Markland. Lavi, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, a little bit under the weather, but just like Bret Hart going against the Mountie, I'll give it my all. I guess that's not the best example, but I'll do my best.
Hey, that was kind of a built-in excuse of why you lost. You know what I mean? The Intercontinental title was under the weather, but you still got to compete. You still got to beat the Mountie. Come on, Brett.
Yeah, Jacques Rougeau, he really had so many lives in the WWE, really reinventing
Yes.
himself. I pretty much enjoyed all of them.
Yeah, he was awesome. I loved him. Now, of course, part of Pro Wrestling Ponderings here. You have the LinkedIn group. We've got so much going on, but I just have to mention this off the top because this is crazy to me. MLW, WWE, the settlement from the lawsuit. I was shocked they got anything, but of course they settled. No longer is Jerry McDivitt kind of running things for that end of things as far as the lawyers and as far as legal team. So now the TKO team is taking over. What was the settlement amount? What was the number? And do you think that because TKO is now taking over the legal matters, that they just kind of okay, we'll give them the money? You know what I mean? Like when Turner used to do that when they would get sued, they would just give up. Like Heyman sued him for something. He was totally wrong. He knew he was wrong, but he still ended up getting money and talent for the exchange. Is that the same thing going on here with TKO?
So we know TKO isn't going to just roll over because they've inherited a case that perhaps is even bigger. It seems like
Oh,
it.
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
This
UFC.
Kung Lee et al., I guess is the best way to describe it, which has become, I don't know if it would be described as antitrust as well, but from what I understand, no fighters that were represented in that time period covering many years opted out. So by not opting out, they've opted in. They're opted in, so it's X number of fighters against the UFC, and I'm not sure how to couch it in a legal term, but it alleges sort of practices, aggressive practices, right, to remain number one promotion. So now that the two are both aligned under the TKO umbrella, WWE and UFC, you could see some parallels, but the MLW case is certainly was a smaller one in comparison, and a 20 million, I'm already increasing it, $20 million award, or a settlement, excuse me, to MLW, in the bigger picture probably isn't that big. And it doesn't mean that every promotion is going to come out of the woodwork now and try and sue them for that, because you have to have some basis to stand on, which MLW almost didn't, right? They had to redo their proposal in so many words, in order for the case to move forward. So 20 million. So I've been thinking about this 20 million number. We don't know the deal or the agreement that MU had with the Kasowitz firm, which was representing them. And I'm not sure if antitrust on contingency, like sort of like, you get those ads on television, like, God forbid, is your child born with um, Bell's palsy, not Bell's palsy, but cerebral palsy, or, one Erb's palsy, one of these things. And there's a big ad near where I grew up, and, you could win 10, 20, $30 million, all that sort of thing if the hospital is, at fault. So they do that a contingency because people don't have the type of money where they could keep paying these law firms hundreds of dollars, sometimes maybe even into 1,000 for a top firm these days per hour. So one of the things that I was always thinking about with MLW is, are they paying Kasowitz like their legal team per hour? That could grow so much. Or perhaps there was a contingency. So if it's a contingency, which we don't know, I looked it up just before. Usually in New York State, that's capped at a third. So it might be, instead of 20 million, whatever, quick math, 12 and a half or 13 million that the UFC, that MLW is seeing. So 20 million, once it gets to antitrust with big, um, with big business, like you're always talking in the millions, I'm sure. Now, thinking past this, even if it's just 12 million or whatever it may be, is there really a path for MLW to go forward in terms of building a big business and sort of making more money out of this, out of these millions of dollars, or really is it throwing good money after bad? We'll talk about some of their success this week in a moment in terms of live events, but sometimes I just think I don't know who invested what at what point, but we know that there's a number of investors. Wouldn't it just be something to think about of saying like, hey, we got $1 million. Thank you for your time. I think we're done here. You have this percentage, you have that percentage. Everyone go have a good life and just close the door rather than being like, oh, we could sign the Super King of Bros now and get him for 7 dates in 2024. Like, not to sound bleak, but what's really going to happen as a result of that? They don't have a major platform. They don't have an aggressive touring schedule. They really, in my opinion, don't really have a way of making big money. So like, what's this all for? They're like into 2019, sort of like even a little bit into AEW's founding, they had like a certain niche in the market, this fusion idea. You didn't always see talents coming together from so many different places, but now they don't really have much buzz. A lot of talent has openly complained about their pay. I have no idea what it actually amounts to. And yes, they have certain things that they could do. So we really have to look at 2024 to see if they can make something of things, because the last few years, and partly it is due to dealing with this lawsuit, things have been down. But they're not necessarily too big to be small, too small to be big. But like GCW has its volume, and they have their passionate fans, and hundreds of people come out, and X amount of people subscribe to Triller Plus and buy their merchandise. Obviously, AEW is at another level, and so on. So probably in terms of US promotions, most comparatively right now, it would be the NWA, which I guess depending on their deal with CW Plus app, or the CW app, like what are they fighting for now too? I think both promotions, it's sort of like wondering what is their place, and is there the opportunity to grow or just spend more money in the market?
It is interesting that okay, you get that money right from WWE. Like, are they doing that to bring in the Japanese talent and using it that way and sign Riddle and do all these other things, or are they going to save that money and get out of the business because they got this load of cash? But I don't think they're out of the business, obviously, because they do have a bunch of shows coming up. But it's one of those things where very interesting kind of dynamic. Hey, we just got a good chunk of change, at least 12 million. Obviously, it's 20, but you got to play the lawyer fees and everything else. But interesting to see what they do from here, because they are now bringing in a bunch of Japanese talent too. So I wonder if that plays a factor in any of the financials as well.
Yeah, they are spending the money. I don't think they're like, okay, this 10 million or whatever is burning a hole in our pockets. Let's just spend it now. They could plan for the long term. I'm just not sure
Right.
like how you would turn it around. Sometimes with the right angle or the right talent, you can do so. But those talents, you get once in a lifetime talent like at MJF, who, there would be no assumption he would have stayed with MLW forever, but you can't really hold on to them. And you had it going with Fatu, who was there much longer than anyone could expect, and really identified MLW sort of like its niche in the market, along with a little bit later Hammerstone, I would say. So you had that benefit, but how can you do that again? But just looking at their recent shows and announced shows, so they're coming back for Battle Riot 6. Wow, time flies. June 1st
Yep.
in Atlanta, center stage, popular venue. Now in New York, last night at the Melrose Ballroom, they sold out. They released a few more tickets, but it's a venue that I believe would hold less than 1,000 in terms of reserve seats. It's several hundred. I should have looked that up before talking about it today. But I think you book a venue, you sell it out, take the win, right? Like I don't mean to diminish that at all, but just in terms of looking about their upcoming schedule. So like I mentioned, they were just in New York. Then they'll be in St. Petersburg for their War Chamber, Cicero, Illinois for Azteca Lucha in May, and then the aforementioned Battle Riot in June in Atlanta.
It does seem like they do have a bunch of talent coming in just from all over. They've got talent coming, even some more people from New Japan, some Mexican stars. So they're either were had a plan to use money beforehand and were using it, or they're using that WB money. But they're definitely kind of pumping up some of these shows, and obviously they're doing pretty good on the live events right now.
So I think what they're trying to build is sort of like this, like you know, open to all borders type of thing, and we'll have the CMLL talent challenges later, but where talents can come in from Japan, come in from Mexico, top, the indie talent or names that have been attached to MLW for a long time that don't work a lot of other places right now, like Davey Boy Smith Jr. or something like that. But I think it's sort of a dated thing to the market, because you sort of have that already with AEW. You have sort of that appeal in some ways with NXT. GCW does that. You have the WrestleMania and special weekends. So I'm not sure, like, floating these talents in and out, if there's, anything to particularly build on, as opposed to like a one-off or a couple of shows and then it's sort of the next talent, like a traveling attraction type of thing.
What about New Japan Pro Wrestling? As we're talking about some of the New Japan guys being in MLW, what's going on with them? What's the latest with the Windy City Riot?
So again, I don't want to claim two great predictions with the Windy City Riot because of my initial ones, but excuse me, it's sticking at about 5,000 in terms of tickets sold. There's a very specific reason for it, I feel, is that the second time around when they opened up tickets, ticket brokers were like, oh, we better get in on this and not miss out. And they bought up a ton of tickets that haven't sold that well. And then New Japan came in with their top tier, which they opened up. So there's a setup of just under 6,700 seats in this 10,000 seat building, but it's pretty much sticking at 5,000, up 41 tickets from 7 days ago, so 5,095, and it's not until April. So if you keep moving in that trajectory, maybe you'll get 200 more seats sold. So no matter what, no matter
Super
who bought
impressive.
it, it's definitely a win for them.
Yeah, super impressive they were able to do that. And if you look at it, I mean, there's no more Okada, he's gone. There's no more Osprey, he's gone. So they're kind of doing this with like a level below, if you will. I mean, those are their two top guys, maybe by a lot, if you think about it, besides Naito. So it's like, wow, they did that 5,000 plus seats, maybe even going in towards 6,000 soon without their two top dogs.
Yeah, it's impressive no matter what. I'm trying to think though, was it like, remember, like with New Japan and Ring of Honor in Madison Square Garden, like, right, there was certain expectations that certain talents would be there and they weren't. Did the timing line, did we know already that Okada and Osprey would not be here for this Chicago show?
Not sure. It was speculated upon because it was said
Okay.
that they were going to sign with AEW, but I don't think it was set in stone as of yet.
Okay. But I think though it is like the brand that they promoted, this is going to be a
Yep.
huge show or something like that, and then they delivered with it. So and I like this strategy, in terms of just having a few shows a year, letting things breathe a little bit, and so on, and moving around the markets, and using some AEW talent to which they're connected for coverage, and bringing in some of the top New Japan talent, which you really need. So they'll be in Ontario, California, as we talked about, on May 11th for Resurgence. So there, it wasn't off to as strong a start, but relatively not bad, I would say. When it's a few months out and you've broken over 1,000, I mean, there's all the costs from Japan and opportunity costs, but thus far it's moving along. 1,353 seats, 214 increase in the last 7 days, so that's good movement. And the show is until May 11th. And then I can't say too much about it, but I think it's a good thing that they announced an agreement with Costa Rica Wrestling Embassy. I wasn't familiar with the promotion, so I'll have to ask our friend at WrestleMap about that. But Fight Opinion, our friend Zach Arnold, had some more about sort of what's going on in Japan, and he has certain takes that aren't always popular, but I think they're very insightful. And again, I'm not claiming I know the Japanese market intricately, so these are always helpful as well. So Bushiroad is not sending the big brains to Bushiroad fight. Fumi says Bushiroad executives don't respect wrestlers, or Rossi Ogawa. Okay, so he's transcribing this from a podcast or YouTube interview. They're not into long-term matchmaking or managing locker rooms. However, they do meddle and overrule Rossi Ogawa. Fumi Saito said on Bushiroad, they have no idea how this wrestling thing works. This includes random gimmick death matches. Fumi says Jado and Guido are not telling Bushiroad bosses all the details and plans of New Japan. They treat female wrestlers differently than the guys. Bushiroad looks at wrestling as a product. They see wrestlers as a product, content farming. Wrestling is really a human business. Wrestling is a strange creature, and wrestling fans are strange creatures, some more than others. So you get out to a hard and controlled business plan. Fumi talks a lot about Rossi Ogawa's background with All Japan Women. Fumi claims Rossi Ogawa wanted a divorce from Bushiroad for about a year. Bushiroad wants established stars and celebrities they can immediately produce content for, where Rossi believes in development and looking for the next golden rookie.
Very interesting from the guys over at Bushiroad, and obviously a lot to talk about with Rosie Agawa, maybe in the future with him possibly starting his own promotion yet again. But the next story is very interesting to me because remember back in 2002, Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon sold their stock to the consortium, and that consortium was owned by the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, and Flair became part owner of WWF, of course, in storyline. But in real life, TNA, Scott D'Amore did have a consortium. Break that down for me. What the heck was going on with TNA and D'Amore, and what kind of led to the exit?
So, from the reporting, sources from TNA believe that D'Amore-led consortium valued the promotion between $7 million to $12 million, with the initial offer of $10 million assumed to cover the cost of TNA as a whole, plus additional costs to cover any trade debts racked up by the promotion, leaving Anthem with around $10 million out of the deal. Anthem are said to have rejected the offer cold, with no counteroffer made by either side. So I was trying to make a joke, but I couldn't quite get there on Twitter without it being too confusing. But I was like, well, MLW can buy TNA twice over now, right? Imagine that, like,
Yep.
TNA fans going crazy
Yes.
about something like that. But I think, it's hard to know what one means when valuing a promotion. So then, we were hearing about, like, saving money and not saving money. So Meltzer reported that the idea is to go live and have a location where they go every Thursday, and Full Sail University is one of the places they've talked about. So, of course, being home of NXT, to do such a thing, I think it's a worthwhile idea. Would it cost more or less? That's the question. I guess, how many talents are you having to fly into Orlando on a weekly basis? The venue wouldn't cost you much. The production wouldn't cost you much if it's built in, or at least if you have the structures and you use your own production people. Although they seem to have spent, or were planning to spend money in Nashville. I don't know why it'd have to be live. Like, I don't think with TNA it would really affect the ratings. Maybe you can go there every other week or something like that. But we know with the sound studio that it tends to get stale after a while, seeing the same
Yeah. Yep.
venue week to week and the same fans going and so on. So if you were trying to save money, you would do multiple tapings from something like that. But if you were trying to create excitement, being live in a little box, I don't know if that's too exciting.
What do they got coming up as far as new
So
taping?
yeah, so a little bit awkwardly, right? Scott D'Amore's hometown and home venue. They'll be in Windsor, Ontario, at the college for Sacrifice, and a taping to follow in March. But good venue selection for them. I'm curious to see, like, how this venue does in the future, sort of without having as much on the ground support. 2300 Arena later in the month, and then a little bit more ambitious in Vegas in April. Mike Johnson of PW Insider reported that at No Surrender, there were 750 fans in attendance. The TNA had originally set up for 600, and they had to keep adding more seats. And this crowd sounded really hot for the broadcast. So a good thing for them there. And then, they own the stations, so it's not like it's at the whim of the new president or programmer. But when you have somebody new in charge, it's always something to think about. MTV veteran and Revolt TV alum Andy Schuan has been named president of Access TV and HDNet Movies. Schuan will oversee all aspects of the channels. He has a long history as a content executive in cable TV, media, and music. He's a trailblazer, driving force, legendary brand builder. He co-founded Revolt Media and TV, Sean Diddy Combs' independently owned music and television brand. I've never heard of that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Revolt TV. I just had never heard of it, especially with Puff Daddy behind it. Sean also served as executive VP and general manager of Warner Brothers Records and MTV, MTV2, selection for the VMAs and MTV Awards. Okay, so I we often think about Access TV as just TNA and New Japan, but it's basically a music channel, music focused channel, not necessarily videos, but different features on musicians and concerts and so on. So it makes sense.
What is going on in the world of GCW? Seems like they got a couple cool names of shows. They always do that, though. They always have cool names of shows, but I feel like the next ones coming up are pretty cool.
Yeah, so they'll be returning to the Ukraine Culture Center with How High on April 20th. No subtlety there. Little marijuana leaf in the middle. And then they'll be at the Dirty Bourbon April 21st. And it happens to be in the same, looks like commercial parking lot area, where Breaking Bad was filmed. They might even be having a show in the office. I guess the main office from the show. I've never seen that, but that's kind of cool when you, especially for a smaller venue, when you have something like that appeal or a way to brand it in such a way that it doesn't just look like a parking garage, in Atlantic City now or something like that.
Right.
Jacob Fatu showing love for GCW. I want to thank Lauderdale and GCW for always rocking with me with no problems. Love and respect. So I think that's great. If they could have such a talent with no issues, who's been reported as having issues in terms of making it to some shows and so on in the past, or at least one show. So good to have that relationship. And he's been able to team up with relatives or members of his stable and so on. So and many booking dates. So why not? Of course. So one of the areas which isn't the biggest deal, but in the St. Louis market at Pops nightclub, we've talked with Brett about it not being like a great drawing venue, but I think Brett has something here because we're starting to see like 4 rows around the ring are sold out or nearly sold out with just general admission, unless they added seats later. By the time you hear this, this show will have taken place on March 1st. But sometimes it's like you come back to the market all the time, and sometimes it's hot and you burn it out. But other times it's like you start out very slow and then you start building momentum. So we're starting to see that here. Indianapolis is also a their event, right? There was plenty of second and third row seat remaining. In Atlantic City, market that's been down for a bit. They're March 9th, they're 3 rows deep on the first night, but plenty of seats from the fourth row and beyond. And then second night, 10 rows and more in the second row and beyond. So curious to see if there's still double shots that will continue along. In Detroit, on March 23rd, I believe. They were 7 rows ringside sold out. Now, I was thinking about it in Detroit that I don't think it's 4 ways around the ring. So I was thinking like 7 was a lot of rows for them, but I'd have to double check on that. But I think it's more like sloped type of seating, but still a good number for them. And in Rochester, a return to Brett to his hometown, a smaller venue, or I think a venue that can have 2 different types of spaces. It looks like they took the smaller space because the first few rows have been sold out a while and they didn't open up more reserved rows. But there's 10 or more general admission, likely more seats remaining.
What is going on in the world of the NWA? Feels like they've got some shows coming up, but it also feels like maybe running some places they haven't ran before, maybe.
So we've long been talking about Dothan, Alabama, March 2nd for NWA Hard Times, a continental venue, and then it hosted at least one UFC, which is great. Uh, Basically they've just opened up the floor and they're almost sold out of this setup on the floor, so I think that's a good thing for them. I haven't checked, it's the day before, but I took a screenshot a couple days ago as of this recording. I haven't checked if they opened up more, but definitely good showing, and like I mentioned before, I think a really smart venue selection. But then they announced the deal with the CW, right? So like, which we've been
Right.
talking about for a long time, so that was interesting because it was here already. Today, this was February 21st. Grammy Award winning founder of Smashing Pumpkins, Corgan, proudly announced an exclusive streaming deal for the NWA with the CW. Under this newly minted all encompassing partnership, when I saw that, I looked up and I didn't see, I don't believe they were on Triller anymore. Multiple NWA programs will be streaming and on demand with the CW platform, democratizing access to action-packed wrestling from some of the sport's biggest, boldest, brightest. All programming is notably available free of charge without a subscription via the CW app. Somebody reached out to me and had a good point. How is it democratizing it differently if it was on YouTube for the most part? And what if you're in another country? It represents a monumental power move for the NWA. The partnership not only amplifies the brand's presence through pop culture and the Zeitgeist, but also a precedent for wrestling at large. Flagship program Power is live on the platform now and features Return to Robarts, programming emanating from the Robarts Arena in Sarasota. New episodes air weekly on Tuesdays with past seasons available. The Paranoid Live event on Power is also available. Shot January 13th, Revolution Live in in Fort Lauderdale. Next up, the Massive Signature event, Hard Times. So with the CW app, I was also thinking about like, oh, okay, now they have the NWA and they have WoW, but WoW isn't there anymore. So now it's really just
Wow.
the NWA. Curious to see if NXT will be on the app. But from a recent article, I don't think they'd spend the extra money to do so. So this is what this said. But for the CW's parent company, Nexstar, the largest TV station owner in the United States with 200 stations, the future lies in wide-ranging programming that attracts viewers to the battlefield competitors are leaving behind. I'm so glad we're not in the SVOD business. Dennis Miller, the president of CW, told The Wrap in an interview after Network's press day. Unlike our peers out there, Nexstar has a wonderful cash flow and margin business and is not losing $500 million a quarter competing in streaming. Everyone knows Netflix has won on a global scale and has done a brilliant job of building that business.
Think about this. I was talking to somebody with obviously some intimate knowledge of this, and they were saying CW liked the Billy Corrigan reality show more than they liked NWA. I don't know if that's true or not, but I could see that appealing to the masses more because everybody knows the Smashing Pumpkins, everybody knows who Billy is, so they would be interested in his wedding. They would be interested in a reality show about him. So, is that also a part of the deal too? Is like they wanted Billy Corrigan and they wanted to be able to film him?
Yeah, I think there's something about the wedding that it really appeals to the CW. Yeah, I think the NWA has a name and a cachet, especially for those that have been following wrestling for a long time. But really, it hasn't been in the mainstream for 35 years, maybe a little bit more than that, but a little bit less than that. But having Billy Corgan opens the doors, but apparently doesn't open too many doors to big cable or big streaming deals and so on. We don't know what it is with the CW app, but clearly they're not looking to invest a lot in the streaming wars. But they have a taping in Tampa at the PBS studios, which I love. Always, if you have access to that, why not? It's already a built-in studio. And like I mentioned, when you search on the CW app now, wrestling, the only thing that comes up is NWA Power in terms
The
of
CW
episodes.
The app, to me anyway, is so easy to use. I know that's like, "Oh, you're selling me on the CW app." It just when I was pull up NWA, I'm like, "Wow, that's easy." When you pull up Peacock, no offense to, Peacock there, but it seems a little annoying. You gotta go find WWE, then you gotta find, like, "Wait, what year was Royal Rumble 1991? Oh, yeah, it's the 3rd one, like or the 4th one. Oh, yeah, that's the Rumble." You know what I mean? I hate the way it's done. It just seems I know it's less if stuff and the less shows, but the CW app just seemed like they had it a little bit more streamlined than Peacock. Peacock needs to work on their inner workings of the app.
Yeah, and John, I'm more old school with the traditional
Yes,
pay-per-view purchase.
yes,
But the truth of the matter was that I subscribed to the WWE Network for a number of years, and it was kind of I can't think of any specific reason why I had any issues with it, but I just always found it easier just to go to YouTube and find old content there. And when I wanted to watch a pay per view, or they didn't call it this at the time, a premium live event, like at that time it would lag because everyone, of course, was trying to watch it at the same
yes.
time, whether it was WrestleMania or whatever, SummerSlam. So I kind of gave up on that. I kept it longer than I needed to, but eventually canceled it.
Let's talk a little OVW. What's going on with them? Are they expanding their reach?
So they're trying a number of things. So in our LinkedIn group, the business of the business, I actually reposted a an advertising or sales position that they had, but their new owner, or one of their owners who's new to the promotion, has been posting a lot on LinkedIn, sort of talking about trying to make deals or expand and those sort of things. So there are those ambitions, but also just getting themselves out there in different places, from Lexington, Kentucky, where they had a nice photo that made the venue look pretty much full. I think it was based on this angle. Sometimes people try and do it, you can tell they're like uh, trying to take. I mean, good for whoever does it, but you can tell sometimes that they're really trying to like position a way to make it look full when it's not. But here it really did look full. And then they'll be in Des Plaines, Illinois. And they call it a national tour. So they're getting out there in a different way. So without going crazy, like when they were saying like national tour, I thought they were going to like put 75 dates on the board and be like, okay, good luck, guys. But if they can expand and they have some on the ground interest and they can sell tickets, like that's what it's all about.
When you look at OVW, though, going national because of Netflix, it seems like could work, but well, obviously it's a risky proposition because we've talked about sometimes New Japan doesn't draw well, then all of a sudden they're drawing well. MLW doesn't draw well, then all of a sudden they're drawing well. So if all these other promotions that are smaller are drawing well, it might take away. They might be going to the other program rather than them, just depending on where they end up. So national tour always risky.
Yeah, and like of course the Netflix show helped, and you had like so many unique personalities, but there's also like there's curiosity because of that, and we've seen that for sure in the Davis Arena. I haven't heard about the sellouts in a little while, but it might still be continuing for several weeks. But there's also like for those that follow wrestling a lot, there's a little bit of like negativity attached to some of the talent, rightly or wrongly, right? Like let's say EC3 with control your narrative, or sometimes people think, and Al Snow, sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth, sometimes like sometimes not in my opinion, but that, or like Brett Lauderdale like openly feuding with them, with Al
Right,
Snow
right,
on Twitter. I mean,
right.
and again, I don't disagree with like the snake eating his tail with hardcore wrestling, but there's not that sort of like positive about it once they hear about it. There's like some people that just be like, no, I would never go to OVW. So like, but they have Dan O's, I think, seasoning or spices. That's a national sponsor. So when you have a sponsorship, that certainly helps to defray the costs or maybe push it towards profitability if it's not yet.
What is going on with Beyond Wrestling?
So there's this show that they have coming up, which is I think part of a festival that they've been putting a big spotlight on, pretty much the first time they're getting outside of their home market in quite a while, or or using a different venue. So there was Nesson had an article. Yes, New England Sports Network still exists. We don't hear the name as much anymore. So I'm just going to move through the article quickly, or different points. The promotion was founded by Drew Cordero and Ricky Shane Page. I didn't know that. I knew Drew Cordero in 2009, and began with the desire to continue their backyard wrestling shows with those with professional training. Beyond Wrestling began with the idea of helping others build a video resume to get booked in other parts of the U.S. YouTube was utilized as a quick and free resource and quickly gained traction. The shows in Providence might have had as many as 12 fans, but Beyond took influence from Southern California promotion Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and the monthly shows at a consistent venue continued to gain notoriety to the point that Beyond Wrestling was called the PWG of the East Coast. It was an honor to get that comparison. It was like the first time that Oni Lorcan and Drew Gulak were booked over to go to PWG. We knew it was because of the reputation they were earning at Beyond. As the promotion's reputation grew, so did Beyond itself. Cordero knew the potential and continued to strive for it to reach new heights. Beyond Wrestling moved its primary location multiple times, with shows running in Somerville, Worcester, where Beyond calls home at White Eagle. YouTube channel grew to gain 3.5 million subscribers in over a decade. Beyond started a weekly show, Uncharted Territory, which at the time was a rarity. It ran its annual big event, Americana, at Foxwoods in 2019, also ran an event at Six String Grill and Stage in Foxborough. However, COVID-19 put a pause on its continued growth. They had a contract signed for Americana at the Worcester Palladium, but it was delivered the day before business shut down in the U.S. Beyond returned to action in 2021, but the summer Americana event was canceled due to Hurricane Henry. Cordero told Nesson that over $20,000 of ticket refunds were issued out. It was a mess. It took us a long time to get back on our feet. Cordero wasn't going to give up. His passion grew into the launch of the Wrestling Open. The show runs weekly on Thursdays and was described as similar to an open mic night, where wrestlers can showcase talent or experience in front of an audience around 200. Cordero admits no wrestlers ever paid their true value based on the damage and risks they put over their bodies, but said the model of Wrestling Open allows for independent wrestlers to get paid better while also providing weekly entertainment for fans. We're able to make it a lot more accessible to not only people who are diehards, but are coming frequently that want to support on a regular basis, but also people who have never experienced wrestling live before or never experienced independent wrestling or used to watch growing up, and now they're getting back into it. As an aside, myself, I saw that there is a couple that got engaged at one of the recent shows. So, Mazel tov.
Oh, nice.
A place for wrestlers to hone their craft was lost in WWE and AEW's massive signings. Before Steen, let me just skip ahead a little bit. Wrestling Open is the past, sort of saying, replacing things like Ring of Honor and so on. I think that what the wrestlers of this generation are realizing is that a little buzz isn't going to get you the dance. You really have to hone your craft and become great at what you do. The only way to do that is through repetition, by getting your performance, by working consistently. Beyond growth led to a point where venues and sponsors are going to it rather than the other way around. Clown Shoes Beer approached Cordero for an event for St. Patrick's Festival in Boston, and Shamrock Slam, like I referenced before, was finalized for March 8th at Harpoon Brewery. It's expected to be the promotion's biggest event with over 2,000 fans. Shamrock Slam will look to deliver with Matt Cardona against Alex Price, who is an East Boston native. Cordero's goal is to continue partnerships that allow the promotion to be seen live in front of thousands of people, but will continue to work to ensure Beyond reaches the heights he knows it's capable of. So, good article. You often don't see that deep dive into a promotion that's doing interesting things.
What's going on with the House of Glory? Are they back, baby?
So, Master P opening up the purse strings maybe a little bit. They're getting more active, kind of getting out of New York. Certainly they'll be in Philly, Revolver versus House of Glory, special show there. So always curious to see how different promotions stand up against one another. So we'll be watching out for that. And then they call it Boston, but it's really in Lowell, Massachusetts. I think at like a youth center, something like that, which is fine. Get out into that market May 26th, and they're back on Triller TV. I'm not sure where they were before. I don't. Probably we had mentioned it, but so many have, of course, pointed towards Triller TV, and I think they'll do well there. They have that type of buzz and appeal.
What is going on with Afa, the wild Samoan? He's retiring, I guess.
Yeah, due to seems like he's had some real health concerns in the past. But WXW, which has been the staple of pro wrestling on the East Coast from first, what is it, the Pennsylvania area,
Yep.
training Batista, I guess most notably outside of many members of the Bloodline, and now in Florida. So WXW posted, "Good morning. Our wrestler staff, family, and friends are all heartbroken and reeling from the announcement last night from our beloved founder and pops, off of the Wild Samoan, that Saturday, April 13th, will be the last WXW wrestling show." Yeah, I think also I'd have to double check, but I think Alpha Junior had opened a training school somewhere else, and I'm not sure if that's still around as well. It's so interesting, like on in those like clickbait articles, it's always like, will this person join the bloodline? Will that person join the bloodline? I'm sure like everyone is like uh, contacting Roman or The Rock, be like, can you get me a job? Like networking their way in here, but like no one really joins the bloodline except The Rock.
True. Yes. Looked like a lot of stuff going on with the bloodline. I know we won't cover that, talk about it, but a lot of stuff going on with the bloodline. We could see what's going on with CMLL. They've got some visa issues, or maybe not.
Yeah, so not necessarily of their own making, but in terms of involving their talent. Um, from PW Insider, in a developing situation that could have a negative ripple effect on upcoming events, has learned that U.S. work visas for nearly 20 CMLL stars in Mexico are in the process of being canceled by the government, U.S. government. Once that happens, it could take months for new visas to go through. I won't read all the names, but there's 20 that up to 20 persons are affected. And speaking to a source close to the situation, the visa is a result of a Texas independent promoter, Full Blown Pro, which runs Laredo and essentially sponsored the group visas for CML talents, right to issues with management over the course of visa process. Sorry, like I mentioned, battling my way through here. PW Insider is told that CMLL head Salvador Lutheroth has placed other employees, one of whom was heading up the legal department for CMLL, but since left the promotion in charge of the visa process on CMLL's end. Should have called Kevin Kleinrock, right? Our friend Kevin, who's worked through these type of issues without, I wouldn't say without difficulty, but has managed this process, which can be quite complicated. From what I've noticed, and I don't know anyone's particular situation, like I've seen, like even going back years, I work in Harlem, and you'd see like flyers promoting like Spanish language shows where it'd be like talents from lucha talents, top names, and you'd be like, oh, they can work here, right? Like it was like pretty much under the radar. But if you get popped, right, like it could be a hard road back, right? Remember Speedball Mike Bailey, right? Like he was banned from working in the U.S. for what, like
Yeah.
5 years,
Yes.
and he's only been able to come back like in the last year. So you really have to be
Which is
super
a shame
careful.
too, because he's a hell of a talent. So kind of a
Yeah.
shame there. Yep. Now, what in the world is caffeine TV? What is this stuff?
So thanks to our friends, this is the brand synergy at PW Pondering. They tagged us on X to put it on a radar. But so first caffeine TV, when they first started, they were hoping to compete with Twitch, and that didn't work out. But they raised a lot of money, and one of the Murdochs from Fox is, I believe, still on their board. And the most notable thing is that they've actually signed a deal with LIV Golf to stream their Friday tournaments. Those weren't previously available for viewing, maybe on their website or maybe on LIV's website, but not through another platform. So it's not necessarily like they raised a lot of money. I think they claim 40. million active users, something like that, however you define that. But it's not necessarily like a ringing thing, right? Like, oh, well, okay, this person's gonna be this little thing is gonna broadcast pro wrestling, or this little nothing will too. Not naming names or whatever. But so the curious thing now is that, like many others, they use things like low level MMA and pro wrestling to bring attention. So first, Glory Pro Wrestling now signed a deal where they'll have new episodes of their Send programming on Caffeine every week. And then there's also something called IndieWrestling.us, where they are affiliated with some, or I don't know if a handful is too little to say, but some independent wrestling promotions where they're able to stream their content, however that works out. So Caffeine TV not necessarily, maybe putting a toe in the water of pro wrestling, maybe similar to the low level MMA, as an article described their content, but something notable because they have a brand now, LIP Golf, very controversially and so on to some, that's very well known outside of like the biggest sports brands, and you have pro wrestling on this platform as well. So curious to see like if they see enough returns from, let's say, Glory Pro, that they want to invest a little bit further in it. And there's a section on the website for Caffeine TV for our promoters that want to look into it, where you can submit a proposal or whatever it may be, and they can review your content. And I don't know, it looks like it's, I would speculate like a revenue share, like however many people view it, you get a cut of it, and so on, which we're all familiar with.
Interesting, just a side note here with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I would have mentioned it before, but it's probably easier just to talk about it now because kind of can also talk about MLW and a couple different things. But they are losing a bunch of free agents. And we mentioned Okada, who's supposed to be going to be on AEW next week. Obviously, they lose Will Ospreay, who already debuted in AEW, kind of under the radar. Looked like they lost Rocky Romero, who's I guess going to be an EVP now for AEW, and he's kind of the liaison between CMLL and AEW. But Tama Tonga is another guy who, you, by the way, a ready-made guy wrestling for over a decade. He's very good, very polished, can talk, and all this other stuff. Could he end up in WWE for the Bloodline? And then you think about Jacob Fatu, very polished, awesome worker, can talk a little bit. He's got everything. Could he debut for the Bloodline? It's almost like these guys that could possibly be in WWE for the Bloodline, who unfortunately are lost to promotions like MLW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, could debut for WWE and kind of just fit right into the main roster, to me anyway.
Yeah, somebody like Tanga, and I've seen it just for a limited time, and certainly Fatu, but like Tanga, is very polished and so on. I guess the challenge is, and like it's like a little awkward to talk about, right? Like when it comes to a person's, I mean, the bloodline, right? They're emphasizing that everyone comes from
Yes.
the same
Yeah.
family tree or background, so I guess it's not that awkward to talk about. But like in a way, unfortunately, it sort of like gets conflated. Like it's a weird thing to say, but are there too many? And like if you're looking at the visual on YouTube, whatever, I'm putting quote marks, right? Are there too
Yeah.
many Samoans on the roster? And that's like a weird thing to say, right? Like you wouldn't say, are there too many Canadians? Maybe
Right.
like
Right. Right.
maybe Vince McMahon would say something like that, but like, are there too many Canadians on the roster? And you think about it differently, I guess, in a way with like Samoans. Like in a way, their paths, it might be a little bit more difficult now because you have so many that are like, especially if they're associated with the bloodline, or it's like known that they're relatives and something like that, sometimes it's hard to stand out. So if you can get like, not to say that all doors are open and everything like that, but like maybe you would do better if you're polished and like a member of the family or whatever, like doing something over in AEW, right?
Yeah, it's just interesting kind of dynamic there. It's crazy to think there might be too many, and you don't want to NWO it if you will. You don't want to have a million guys in the group, and hey, just because you're related, you're in the group, and just have too much. I think that's kind of been the beauty of the group so far is that it's been limited, and it's been basically four guys or even less. Now it's three. Now Rock joins, it goes back to four guys. It just seems better with a smaller, but it's just interesting to note if Roman's not going to be around all the time, could they use that? And obviously, The Rock is part time as it gets. Could they use another guy in the group that's already polished, they can already work, they can already wrestle to kind of help and maybe let Jimmy or Solo kind of be the leader when Roman's not around? Or do you end it? I mean, it's weird to say, but I think The Rock opened up a can of worms there, a good can of worms, showing how many guys are actually could be in the bloodline.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think you have like it's better to be like more conservative, more cautious with things rather than like open it up too much. I think with like bringing Solo, they did a great job with
Yeah.
that, and like right one of the Usos leaving to feud with them and so on. Like the transition was fine there, but and adding The Rock, like it didn't feel like it was being diluted. Of course, the biggest star, one of the biggest stars of all time, it wasn't being
Yep.
diluted in that way. But I think you'd have to be careful, like with just like having an army of people, unless it was sort of like right, like you had like the four horsemen, and then you had like sort of like associates, right? Like not Jeff Jarrett controversy, but you had associates at different
Yep.
points. More thinking about like late 80s, early 90s type of thing. um that's probably the best way to keep it. But speaking about the NWO and somebody that really knew their role, and I don't think diluted it at all, we cannot conclude today without acknowledging the death of Vincent, more known as Virgil. Really a somebody that was there to sort of witness history. I think somebody described it, and really get that spotlight for a while. That angle with Ted DiBiase, where he was leaving as his manservant, quote unquote. And he had a little bit of momentum there working with Roddy Piper, and he was really somebody for a moment, and he contributed to the business and really like a staple of independent wrestling in Northeast. I'm sure, John, you saw him on a ton of
Yeah.
shows in New Jersey.
Bunch. Yeah. R.I.P. to Virgil. One of those guys was funny. It's like, oh, he wasn't in the main events. Hey, he was a part of those main events with DiBiase and with Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. So I mean, he was there, and of course Macho Man. He was there. He was around technically, and he was a big star. I know maybe he wasn't quote unquote a great worker and all of those stuff, but he was on TV basically for almost 10 years in WWF, and then again another 4 or 5 years with WCW, part of the Hogan era in the WWF, which is just astronomical and basically kind of the reason maybe we're even talking today is because of that, and it kind of blossomed into this. But then again, to kind of focus and become a heel and join the NWO in later on in 1996 was huge too. And I felt like he fit in that group perfectly. After him is when it kind of got diluted and too many guys and got watered down. But that was perfect. Former WWF guy, all that TV equity, everybody knew his name, everybody knew who he was. Him joining was like, oh shit, another WWF guy here. They're taking over. So I liked that, and I liked him in the NWO as well. R.I.P. Virgil.
And he was uniquely like, you didn't always see his like personality, maybe like little snippets backstage with WCW, but you didn't often get a sense of his personality. And then with like social media, he was so over the top and entertaining. And then there's like the
Yeah.
legendary stories, whether he liked them or not, Lonely Virgil and so on, that he remained like somebody that everyone knew, even if like you became a fan in like 2005.
Yeah. Some of that stuff was funny, but I remember when I interviewed him a while ago, I asked him, he said he did not like the Lonely Virgil stuff. But he was able to actually kind of fight through that. And towards the end, I remember a few years ago, I mean, he was getting booked like crazy, especially in New York. They would actually be booked and he wouldn't be bringing himself in. They would be, bringing him in. So he kind of turned it around a bit, which is good to see towards the end of his life.
A worker through and through.
Yes, true. All right, let's hit those plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip Lobby. What do you got going on?
Check out my Twitter, Lavie Laviemarg. Check out our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business. A couple of job postings this week, like I mentioned, OVW, and also one from AEW. Check out my long form articles on lioncubjobsearch.com.
All right, thank you everybody for tuning in. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.